The Florida Gators are 500 again following a 70-52 win over Samford. That's a football score, by the way. We'll break down that game today, but first, has Dan Mullen's future changed following that poor showing? Only here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day, available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olson. You can find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. I'm also the founder of Whole9Sports.com, where you can find all of my written work. Just an early reminder, if you didn't see my tweet from yesterday, likely won't be Tape Tuesday tomorrow. Might be, but if there is, it'll only be one segment. But just with coaching talks and basketball season being here for both men's and women's, it's kind of hard to make Tape Tuesday happen this week. So maybe, but I don't want to commit to anything. Now we're going to take a look at Dan Mullen's future with the Florida Gators. Fans and writers have somewhat rightfully been calling for his head for weeks. I don't want to say just like that it's been completely justified, but it's not as if it's not justified, if that makes sense. He's had a very bad year this year. So I mean, I don't want to say I'm not gonna say it's justified, but I'm not gonna say it's completely far-fetched. It's not like we're 7-2 and he's getting that's not the case, or 7-3, whatever. But during his press conference last Monday, following the loss to South Carolina and the firing of Todd Grantham and John Hevesy, Dan Mullen said, based on his conversations with AD Scott Strickland, that he'll be here next year. I don't know if that's changed, because during the horrid showing on Saturday against Samford, people were really calling for Dan Mullen's job. Like, I saw tweets that were like, just from writers, I'm not talking fans, I'm talking writers, like people who cover this team professionally, were just like, hey, like, schedule the press conference right now, call it, book it, whatever you want to say. They were calling for his job to be kaput. I'm not a huge fan of that. I won't be calling for his job just right now. It was an ugly win, but after a horrible first half, the team cleaned up, and I mean horrible first half. The team cleaned up. It was rough, but again, I'm not the type to just call for someone's job like just blatantly. I'm not that quick to pull that trigger. That's just not me. Christian Robinson, the former linebackers coach, who's now linebackers coach and defensive coordinator, calling his first defensive game ever. I think people are overlooking that. The defense made adjustments. Dan Mullen's offense was cooking the whole time, specifically looking at Emory Jones, but the defense made adjustments, which is, I'm going to say this multiple times, better than we can say we saw from the defense when Todd Grantham was in charge. And I think people are really overlooking that. It was really bad in the first half. 42 points in the first half is completely unacceptable. But 10 in the second half, the defense played great in the second half, which I realize is not much, because that means you still gave up 52 points. But the defense made improvements. There were adjustments. And again, this was Christian Robinson's first time ever calling plays for a defense, and he made adjustments, which, again, Todd Grantham didn't do that. So at least we got that. The rumor going around, though, for Gainesville and the University of Florida is that pretty much the Florida State game decides Dan Mullen's future at this point. Again, just less than a week ago, or now a week ago, but at the time the episode is coming out, a week ago, Dan Mullen said, I've been told that I'll have a job next year, pretty much. We're talking long term when I talk to Scott Strickland, which is totally fine. But things can change, especially with the horrible showing against Samford. So things can change, and the rumor going around is that the Florida State game decides his fate. I'm not going to speak on what I think should happen until after this season, but the rumor is that if Dan Mullen wins out, he will keep his job. If Dan Mullen loses out, he will keep his job. If Dan Mullen wins one and loses one, but the win is against Florida State, Dan Mullen will likely keep his job. And I don't know how I feel about that bit where it's just like, oh, as long as you win the rivalry game, we don't care at that point. I'm sorry, as long as you win the rivalry game and you make a bowl game, we don't care at that point because I mean, Missouri is the tougher game. I would care more about the Missouri game. I don't care if you beat the worst team. I get it, being like, oh, like as long as we're better than Florida State. But at the same time, like I'd rather put pressure on you to win this big game and then the rivalry game because the rivalry game, like teams, if your team's not fired up for the rivalry game, like if they don't come out that tunnel ready to fight people, just walk away then because at that point you've lost everything. Because that's a Florida State game. That is the first or second most hated team on the schedule. So that's one where like the team's just going to come fired out where they haven't been doing that the past couple of weeks. South Carolina game, they didn't come out fired out. They didn't come out fired up. And we were like, okay, well now Todd Grantham's gone. Christian Robinson's stepping up. The team likes Christian Robinson. So they're going to step up, right? They're going to be fired up. They're going to be ready to go. And then Saturday showed up and the team just nothing. Kaput. Just no energy defensively, no intensity defensively until the second half, which is like, I don't know if you know how this works, but in football, there's 4 quarters. It's not like college basketball where it's like, oh, first half, second half, and you only got to worry about 2 different time periods. Now, football, you got to worry about 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not just the 2 at the end. Like, I don't know what the hell was going on there. The defense infuriated me in that first half. It was just so awful throughout in every single way. But Dan Mullen, I mean, he's got to get it under control. I get he's not the defensive guy. I get it's Christian Robinson. Christian Robinson's just called his first game ever. Dan Mullen needs to step up and be a leader of this team, or else he's going to not have a job. And Florida will be a top 3 job opening in all of college football if this job opens up. So there's plenty of people that want this job. You know, Dan Mullen was talking about getting a defensive coordinator. He said there's plenty of people that want this defensive coordinator job. There's a lot more that would want that head coach job at the University of Florida. So I'd worry about that, Dan. I wouldn't worry too much about defensive coordinator at the end of the year at this point, because now you're officially on the hot seat. All right, college football fanatics, have you heard about PrizePicks? PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and I know you will too. PrizePicks offers every sport you can think of. Talking NFL, college football, NBA, college basketball, MLB when it's in season, soccer, MMA, and more. PrizePicks offers more college football props than anyone in the world. And if you don't know, it's already incredibly difficult to find college football props anywhere. So PrizePicks, that's where you got to go for them. They offer all the star players of the Power 5, Damian Pierce, Jacob Copeland, Emory Gamble if you'd like that, Emory Jones if you like that, and people that you may have never heard of like Bryce Mitchell, Bryant Koback, Devontae Maddox, all those fun names. PrizePicks allows mixed sport entries. You can take the over on LeBron rebounds and the under on Mahomes rushing yards if you want. I don't care. Go for it in the same entry. Don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks.com or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available free and daily wherever you listen to podcasts. Now getting into this game review offensively, Emory Jones, have yourself a day. Also, I want to point out that Anthony Richardson supposedly was supposed to come in late in the game, but Anthony Richardson did not come in late in the game because Emory Jones is close to the record. So kudos to you, Anthony. But Emory Jones, 28 of 34 passing for 464 yards and 6 touchdowns, 10 carries for 86 yards and a touchdown, the Florida record for yards in a game by an individual, and tied the Florida record for touchdowns in a game. So Emory Jones was just a phenomenal game on Saturday. And I mean, hey, I think enough. I tweeted this. I don't think enough people are talking about this. With how bad the defense played, Emory Jones's performance is that much more impressive and more important, because if Emory Jones did not have this kind of day, then this was a loss to Samford. I think that's very important to note, that the defense played like dog, you know what. But Emory Jones played phenomenal. He wasn't the only one that played phenomenal, but he was the main guy that played phenomenal on offense. And he carried this team to win. He's someone that we've spoken about where it's like, he won't win you games. But if it wasn't for Emory Jones, this was a loss. Emory Gamble had a career day himself, 6 catches, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It was also a very important game because this was the first game that Emory Gamble's mom was able to see since getting home from the intensive care unit, which she was in there for 2 months. So she was there for the entirety of the season, and this is the first game she got to see from him. 6 catches, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, a huge breakout game for Emory Gamble. And I know Senior Bowl invites are coming out. I want to see Emory Gamble in Mobile. That's something that I want to see from him. I want to see him out there. We got to see some split zone read again between Emory Jones and Emory Gamble. So that was fun to see, and to see it work. It led to a pretty big game for Emory Jones. And the first Florida game this season, this week against Samford, was the first Florida game this season without a turnover by this offense. So round of applause. Go ahead, guys. You deserve it. Go ahead. Way to go. Way to go. Your first game in your 10th game to go without a turnover. So proud of you guys. But sorry, that was like way more sarcastic than it had to be, way more condescending than it had to be. But like it's ridiculous that we could play Vanderbilt and we still turn the ball over. So just that's why I'm pointing that one out. Defensively, what is there to say about this Florida Gators defense? The first half might have been the worst defense I've ever seen any team play. I know it's the worst defense I've ever seen the Florida Gators play, but it might be the worst defense I've ever seen any team play against anyone at any point at any level. I'm talking high school too. That was just atrocious. Samford scored 5 touchdowns on their first 6 drives of the game. It was just so bad. But I mean, I can't even harp on how awful it was. I'm gonna have to get into it, but I did want to point out something that I mentioned last week with Christian Robinson taking over. I said, hey, he hasn't played here. He hasn't worked for coaching staffs that typically call a lot of blitzes. So I don't know if he will, but I would like to see him dial up some blitzes. Tyrone Hopper had more blitz attempts against Samford than he's ever had in a game, or than he had in a game this year. Mohamed Diabate had the second most blitz attempts than he's had at any point in the season. We saw more defensive back blitzes. We saw both Avery Helm and Kyer Elam rush the quarterback, rush the quarterback blitz. We don't know. We saw them come in on rush attempts, but again, it's hard to say if they were necessarily blitzing or if they just recognized it quickly and came in. So it's hard to say blitzes. So I'm talking pass rush attempts there. So it looks like with Christian Robinson as our defensive coordinator, we're going to keep seeing blitzes. The defense made adjustments, which again is more than I can say about the defense under Todd Grantham at any point in his tenure. I'm looking forward to seeing how this defense improves because, of course, yes, it was Samford. It was a team we should have blown out, but it was also Christian Robinson's first time ever calling plays. It was Christian Robinson's first time ever having to be the guy that at halftime is like, all right, that we sucked at this. We need to make adjustments. And he made those adjustments. So that's good. That's why I'm trying not to seem like I'm just like a hopeless optimist or a fan or whatever. But I will say that adjustments were made. And that's something that people should, yes, you can go all you want about how we shouldn't have even been close with Samford for the huge majority of the game. You could talk about how we should have been blowing them out off the get-go. You could talk about the energy that the game came out with, but you need to also acknowledge Christian Robinson made adjustments in the second half, which is an improvement over Todd Grantham, and that in itself is kind of a win, at least to me. I don't know about you guys, but I've always said it. I'll take my wins where I can get them. That's a win where I can get them. So I'm totally fine with that. I don't know about you guys, but football season is here, and now I'm constantly snacking because basketball season is here too. College basketball season, college women's and men's, all here, so always games. And we had 2 basketball games yesterday, so it's just constantly snacking while watching these games. So I've committed to eating Built Bar as my snack instead of other sugar-filled snacks or salty snacks. Built Bar is the best protein bar on the market. If you're trying to eat clean, but you've got a sweet tooth like I do, I have no problem admitting that. That is no longer a problem. Built Bar is your low-calorie, low-sugar, high-protein, and high-fiber solution. You can even enjoy Built Bar if you're keto. Remember to use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your next order. That is locked, LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your next order at built.com or builtbar.com. Now we're looking at the good, bad, and ugly from Saturday's game against Samford, which ugly, everything. Now, the good, the tackling from Florida comparatively to what they usually do. So Florida, of course, had 69 combined tackles from this Gators defense. Only 5 missed tackles. And this is a Gators team that averages 10 missed tackles per game. Samford had the most plays or most offensive plays against us than any team in our season. Vanderbilt had 80 and Samford had 85 plays. So that was the most defensive plays. And we had, I believe, the least missed tackles that we'd had at any point. So thank you, Florida, for finally wrapping people up. And thank you, Christian Robinson, for teaching your players you got to go like this. You haven't teach them to cover yet, but you got to teach them to go like that. And you taught them to do that. So thank you for that because, hey, that was an improvement. Imagine if we had our 17 missed tackle games like we've done so many times this year. But no, only 5 missed tackles from a team that averages 10 missed tackles per game. So that was a huge improvement. And I don't want to hear that it was against Samford because Samford, look at Montreal Washington. I'm going to talk about him in a little bit, but he was stellar. So I don't want to hear about Samford not having players. Emory Jones, yeah, you're here again because holy sheesh, this man had himself a monstrous day. I know I've already spoken his game. I know I've already spoken about how if he didn't play that well, that this was a heavy loss. But I also want to point out with Emory Jones, he is one of the few players on this team that, and I give him more credit than anyone else. We've given Diabate credit. We've given Kimori Gamble credit. We've given all these guys credit for sticking through it and and never wavering. And with all the players that are clearly giving up on the team, all the players that are lost in the locker room, all that fun stuff. But Emory Jones, more than anyone else, I will give him credit for because not a single Gators player has taken more criticism than Emory Jones. And I don't think there's been a single Gators player that has shown more heart, competitiveness, drive, intensity, all that fun stuff than Emory Jones. Because if he were most other players, he would have turned his back on the program and he would have said, hey, the fans don't care about me. I don't care about them. So, we've seen it. I don't want to bash him at all, but like Felipe Franks gave up on the program, rightfully so, by the way. I don't care how bad he was playing. He rightfully gave up on the program because he was going to home games and getting booed. He was going out and having Gators fans talk trash about him. And it's just like, why is that something you have to do? Why do you have to pester players all throughout their lives? Just let them show up, let them play the game. If they're playing poorly at that moment, then, and you want to let them hear them a little bit, go ahead. But, Emory, I spoke about 90,000 fans booing him at one game. Like, I know I've had comments be like, stop calling a football team disgusting. As fans, you're disgusting if 90,000 of you are booing a college kid trying to play quarterback, and he's clearly giving it his all. You should boo the coaching staff at that point. But if a player's giving it his all and he's just not good enough, that's different than if a player's just checking in or checking out, really. And Emory Jones has never done that. So I give him nothing but credit and respect for being able to stick through with this very rough fan base. That's what they are. It's a rough fan base. And Emory Jones has stuck through, played the best game of his career on Saturday in a game where evidently we needed him more than ever. Looking at the bad from Saturday, Dameon Pierce's absence from the game. I get it. I talk about Dameon Pierce, get him the ball, hand it to him, throw it to him. I don't care what you do with him. Get him the ball. I'm not even talking about that. I am literally talking about his absence from the game, him just not being on the field for way more than understandable. He should have been on the field more than he was. And why he wasn't, I will never get. That just it makes no sense to me. But him not being on the field was just dumb. And when he came on the field, oh my God, he made a lot of plays. It's almost like he's a great playmaker and he's a great running back at the ball. It just makes no sense why Dan Mullen does not just feed him or put him on the, especially if you're going to throw the ball. He's one of the better pass catching backs. He's the best pass blocking back. Just put him on the field. I don't get it. And then penalties. The Gators had 12 penalties called on them for 94 yards. This is a game where I get it. The game was way closer than it should have been, but this is also a game where we should have been just mopping the floor with Samford. We didn't. And granted, some of the penalties made no sense, like a pass interference call on Khair Elam when he did literally nothing wrong. I don't get that one. That one makes no sense to me at all. But for the most part, the penalties were accurate and completely unacceptable. Let's say they missed 2 or 3 penalties. That's still 9 to 10 penalties that were rightfully called against the Florida Gators, against a team that, one, we were favored against. We were favored by 35.5 against. And 2, we should have been dominating because they're an FCS school and we are a Power 5 program. So I don't get it. But also, yeah, the penalties were completely unacceptable. Just so a lack of discipline just throughout. It was ugly. It was horrible. It was disgusting to watch. Oh no, I said disgusting. Now someone's going to insult me again in the YouTube comments. I'm so sorry. But it was. And looking at the first half defense, I'm not even going to spend too much time talking about the first half defense because coverage was awful. Simple as that. Tackling wasn't great, wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. And the defense just had no heart. And that is the part that bothers me more than anything else. Because with Todd Grantham against South Carolina, we were like, okay, he's lost the defense. Simple as that. With Christian Robinson, we were told, players like him. Players like Christian Robinson. Players are going to play for him. Diabate, and I'm not putting this on Diabate at all, but Diabate was like, hey, we're fired up. Like, we love Christian Robinson. Like, we're fired up. And then the defense just came out and did nothing. And again, I'm not placing it on Diabate because he did try. He's one of those players where no matter what, he is going to try his hardest. But the defense just looked flat in the first half. And it's like, that shouldn't be a thing. If you're bringing in this new defensive coordinator, like, you got rid of the guy that was killing your morale. And then you brought in a new guy and we were like, oh, like this is going to be great. And then it still sucked. And it's like, okay, well, what is it now? Because honestly, I think that's more telling about Dan Mullen and his future with the team, that we changed defensive coordinators and they're still not playing their hardest for him. And I think that's more telling than just changing defensive coordinators and being like, oh no, I haven't lost the locker room. I think it's more telling to be like, hey, you've changed defensive coordinators and the defense still isn't showing up. And it's not that they're not showing up because they're not good enough. They're not showing up because they're not trying their hardest, and it's evident. And then looking at the ugly, the defense again, but specifically against Montreal Washington, who I spoke about briefly before, but right before the game, I tweeted about Montreal Washington's stats, and I was like, hey, I'm not saying that I'm going strictly based off stats, but I saw his stats, and I was like, all right, he at least deserves a watch if he's being this productive. Going into the game, he had 45 catches, 688 yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, 15 carries, 124 yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. Against Florida, he had 10 catches, including one sick catch, one hand in the end zone. Beautiful. But 10 catches, 124 yards, and a receiving touchdown, which again was perfect. It was a beautiful play. Okay. 3 carries for 19 yards and a TD, and a kick return touchdown. And I'm including him specifically in here because, one, I'm talking about below Bix. He balled out, but also he is the first FCS player since Brian Westbrook to have a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a return touchdown against a Power 5 school. And I think that's important to note about how piss poor this defense was, and special teams, that Montreal Washington did this against the Florida Gators. Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, he told me that at least a few NFL teams have a draftable grade on Montreal Washington, and I suspect after watching him ball out against Florida secondary, he's going to have a few more. So that's something that great for him. We were his breakout game. Congratulations. Hope you get to the NFL because of it. Obviously, because of your hard work and because of all that. But Florida made you be like, okay, well, he could do it against Power 5 schools. Maybe he could do it against the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. Don't miss out tomorrow. We'll talk about this past weekend in Gators basketball because we've had 2 women's games and a men's game. Now make your second listen Locked On SEC. Get all of your daily SEC news in less than 30 minutes with SEC expert Chris Gordy of Sports 790. It is free and available on all platforms. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. You can find all my written work with Whole 9 Sports. That is WHOLENINE Sports. And I will see you all tomorrow.